following transmission has been encrypted to protect you, the listener, and the transmitter. Please destroy upon listening. Here's the leader of your underground, Chris Butler.
Now, of course, we would not encourage you to destroy your computer or whatever you're watching this on. You probably wouldn't want to do that.
No.
But we welcome you to Free Market Underground. This is episode number 2. My name is Rob Carson. Hello, hello. And, of course, we have over here Mr. Chris Butler, BLWinvestments.com, also at Facebook at Free Market Underground. How are you, sir?
Good, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. You back in town from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You were there for a while. What were you doing in Pittsburgh, by the way, if you don't mind?
It was a finance geek convention.
Okay. All right, man. Sounds like a party.
Yeah, it was.
Sounds like a party.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and you're back and getting back to the swing of things. It looks like, and I'll just say before we dive into all of the things that are happening, some fairly positive things happening with the economy. This is still early in the week. I had seen, Donald Trump's approval rating is up to 46%. I thought that was kind of interesting. And then we've gotten some decent economic data in the last since the last time we spoke. Sounds like things are kind of on the right track going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
with regard to the American economy,
corporate profits are up. That is a continuing story over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, there's a lot to be thankful for as we go into Thanksgiving.
All we need to do now is work on those tax cuts, I guess.
Yes,
and the tax package. I'm a little bit troubled by our GOP leaders in Congress and them not being able to get things done.
Yeah,
and I think we need to get this. We need to get this done.
What is when the Senate came out with their tax proposal on what was that, Thursday last week?
Yeah, it was Thursday.
There were actually some folks reporting that was basically in line with what the House had been offering. There couldn't be two parties or two factions of the same party further apart on tax cuts, in my opinion. I mean, it was very strange to watch that unfold.
Well, and the thing that is so troublesome is that the Democrats were in charge, at least had the White House for 8 years, and they couldn't get anything done. And it's the same damned talking points. I'm tired of this. Tax cuts for the rich, poor people are going to suffer. Bull crap. And I'm so tired of the tepid response from Republicans.
Yeah.
You've got control of both houses. You've got the presidency. And I got to tell you, I've been impressed with this president abroad, just kicking butt in Asia. And I'm just so tired of this mealy-mouthed bull crap with regard to tax, inventing the tax code in America, which we've desperately needed forever, Chris.
Yeah.
And I'm tired of it. I want them to get something done finally.
I want them to, we have talked about, Rob, you and I have talked about it on when you were on KCMO as well. We've talked about this for a long time.
Yeah.
The rhetoric, the use of the phrase pay for itself, those kinds of illogic forays into verbiage that is just ridiculous. But and we've waxed poetic about that for a long time. What I would like to see to kind of change the talking points is somebody ought to tell me why that income tax is constitutional, number one. I recognize the 16th Amendment, but is it going against what our founding fathers, the intent of our founding fathers? Absolutely. So why do we have it?
Yeah.
It's actually not only against the will of the founding fathers, it is repugnant, and more than anything, Rob, it is stupid. This is a stupid tax that requires stupid people to defend it.
Yeah, and they act like it's their damn money to begin with,
which makes it stupid. Yeah, I mean, here's something for you.
Yes, sir.
When did talking about having these tax cuts pay for themselves? When was it? When was the day that the government spending plans for my money trumped my spending plans for my money? When was that? Because you're exactly right. It has become. They think of that tax revenue as their God-given right, when in fact, that tax revenue is our God-given right.
Yes, but they always act like we've got to pay for these tax cuts. No, we don't. You need to cut your spending.
That's exactly right.
That's the damn problem. We need to cut your spending. I'm just so thoroughly fed up. I see so many positive things from this outsiderist president in Washington, D.C. I just wish that we didn't have so many insiders in Washington, D.C. still there. The swamp is draining. The swamp is draining on the Republican side of the political equation.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's all that seems to be getting drained right now.
Well, there's some other things being drained in Washington, D.C., but let's not go towards the sex scandals and all that stuff. There's a lot of weird stuff happening on there, but we won't get into it. Let's get into what you want to cover this week. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Debt.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about debt.
All right.
And I'm an expert at that, by the way.
I think too many U.S. consumers are, myself included. I've got too much of it.
Exactly.
Everybody wants to reduce it. Everybody should reduce it. And there is a healthy amount of debt at the consumer level. No amount of debt at the federal level is not a problem. I mean, it's all problematic, all the debt. My point that I want to make today about debt is that it stifles GDP. And here's the point that I would make. Debt is not income.
No.
And yet it is being calculated as if it were in our calculations of GDP. And if you strip out, and here's an example. You go you buy a house. Mm-hmm. You get a mortgage, $100,000 mortgage.
Yeah.
The finance company, the bank or the mortgage company, puts $100,000 into your checking account. Do you claim it as income? No. You don't claim it as income because it's not earned. Right? Number one, you didn't earn it. Number two, you have to pay it back.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not income. You didn't earn it. You didn't make it in a market. It's not a capital gain. It is loan proceeds. So why do we include it then when we're measuring national income? Not personal income, national income. Because if you show me chart 1, Rob, and that will be the formula.
This one right here?
No, the next one.
All right, we'll go to the next one. There you are, my friend.
Yes, that is GDP, and I want to... It's consumption spending, it's investment in property, plant, equipment, and it's government spending and net exports. Forget all of that. Focus on the G. Government spending is part of GDP.
Gotcha.
Okay, so if they're spending the money, Rob, that you and I gave them with our taxes, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if they actually are spending loan proceeds, right? Then it's not national income. It's not income at a personal level.
Gotcha.
It's not income at a national level. Let's strip it out. If you strip out all of the loan proceeds that we've taken since the Great Recession, that's the next chart, Rob. That is what GDP
this one right here.
is.
Okay, all right.
And see how it drops like a sack of hammers at the end there?
Jeez.
GDP is negative if you strip out loan proceeds.
Wow.
Now, it's coming back.
Oh.
But it is still negative because we took on so much debt. We got so much loan proceeds every quarter now, and it needs to stop.
Yeah.
That looks to me like a depression.
Yeah. I'm bothered also. And what the hell? I mean, honestly, Chris, when are we going to say you've got the Republican plan that's moved through the House and going to the Senate? Still, we have $1.5 trillion in additional debt being added. Why are we not having a discussion about debt, for crying out loud? The Republican Party for the last 8 years has been screaming as Obama added $10 trillion to our debt.
Right.
Why are we not addressing this? Why are people not carrying torches and pitchforks to the Capitol right now? Because, by God in heaven, we have the Republican president, and all of a sudden it's okay to add $1.5 trillion?
Yeah.
Bull crap.
I agree. And it seems like the old school Republicans, Rob, unless I'm mistaken, they would have swept into office and they would have talked about taking a hatchet to the budget to make the revenues and the expenditures meet, right? Because, and some people listening might not understand this, and it's totally understandable, but just let me explain how we get that debt. We get that debt because we spend more money than we take in taxes, right? Yeah. And it creates a budget deficit, and that budget deficit is financed by taking on debt. A Republican, a fiscal conservative, you would think the first order of business would be, and not that I'm arguing against tax cuts. Absolutely, I want tax cuts. But either way, with or without tax cuts, you have to trim the budget. Yeah. You absolutely have to cut it.
I guess I just don't understand why we can't. And even there's caterwauling in Washington, D.C. when you just say that you want to cut the amount of growth in government. The government has what they do is they have a formula where spending is automatically increased every year. Just by cutting the amount of increase you're going to reduce the debt.
Yes, over time.
But they're still not willing to do that. And damn it, I just don't understand. I don't understand. Well, I do because 7 of the richest counties in America are the D.C. area,
right?
And that's where your money is.
Yeah,
and they don't want to end the gravy train. They're all living out there. They're living large. They're loving life. They've got their big houses. They've got their political cronies around them. So I guess I don't know. It's just frustrating.
The reason we can't have in this country a serious conversation about cutting spending is because there's not that much spending that can be cut without getting into entitlements. Yes. So this is what I would like to have as a prelude to talks about cutting spending. Somebody's going to have to explain to me how on earth it got to be that I am responsible for someone else's retirement. How is it that I'm responsible for someone else's health care? I'm not, is the short answer, which, by the way, I am not suggesting we shouldn't take care of each other. Absolutely we should. But the second that you make it an obligation, capitalism, Rob, is about consent. It's about mutual consent in the markets, right? Yeah. Well, there's nothing mutual or consensual about taking money from that guy to give to that guy. Yeah. There's just not. And you tear at the social fabric, by the way, when you do that. We used to be a country of communities, and that's what the founding fathers were talking about when they were talking about taking care of each other. Yeah. Their thought is that the church would be the first level of defense against poverty.
Gotcha.
Right? Yeah. And then the state, or actually then the city, then the state, then the feds. Somewhere along, well, I say somewhere, FDR took that and converted it right into let's go straight to the feds. And when you do that, it doesn't help the person receiving help, and it doesn't help the person providing the help.
No.
If it were consensual, it would do both. And that's the problem. So let's have a conversation about what we are obligated to do here. And then let's start, the point I really wanted to get to today, Rob, was cutting the debt. Yeah. And when you cut the debt, you can also cut entitlements too. I don't think people realize this. Do you know how much the assets that the federal government holds are worth right now?
Considering what they're leveraged against, nothing. I don't know.
Most people would agree with you. Most would agree.
Yes.
There is a report from an energy consortium that actually placed just the value of the energy in this country held on federal property at $150 trillion.
Wow.
150. So first of all, they own a good chunk of land. The feds own a good chunk of land in this country. They have absolutely no reason to be owning that much land. If you sold 20 trillion of your 150, you get out of debt like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Not only that, but you can actually then say, let's slowly end entitlements. If we've made the promise, let's keep the promise.
Yeah.
But once you get rid of debt, you've lifted a lodestone off of this economy, and it can grow faster than people realize. At the same time, you're slowly reducing the entitlements that are given so that in 80 years, when everybody that is paid in is dead, then you've got a tax rate in this country of roughly about 13% of what it would be today.
Yeah.
Then you make the switch to a sales tax. You get rid of the repugnant income tax, and we're on much better footing. But that's the point I was trying to make. $150 trillion of assets just in energy.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe the Clintons had it right by selling the uranium to the Russians.
We didn't need it. We've got plenty.
Except for we didn't get the money.
No, we didn't.
Except for Hillary's slush fund, because he got the money.
That's
so
right.
She got $150 million or $145 million.
Which she didn't need because she's such a great trader.
Oh,
what was it? Was it beef or pork belly?
Pork. It was cattle futures.
Yeah.
Cattle futures.
She's so good. Well, I don't know why she needed that money. She's great.
But back to the debt in the country and where we go from here.
Yeah.
What are you hoping will happen in D.C. maybe before the end of this year?
Yeah, because what I've just said is, let's face it, radical. Right? Ain't gonna happen. Yeah. But the first step in getting it done is to bring awareness. And start the conversation. Then you move in that way. When you're looking short term, end of the what I hope happens is that there is as much tax cut as is humanly possible, given the constraints that budgetary process has placed on it. They can't have cuts of more than $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years. So I hope we get 1.5 trillion in tax cuts next year. You talk about sharpening the saw and cutting spending. We have to have that conversation, Rob, because 1.5 trillion. I mean, hey, I'm glad that is being repatriated back into the pocketbooks of Americans, but it's debt, and we have to get rid of the debt. By the way, if you were going to sell 20 trillion of U.S. assets, right, and pay off that debt, you'd almost have to have with it some kind of balanced budget amendment, right?
Thank you.
Because otherwise you get in the same position down the road. You have to take out of the hands of politicians the ability to spend money that they don't have. You absolutely have to do it.
Yeah. So if you're talking about selling natural resources
and land,
to anybody who wants to come in and mine it and remove it from our country, and you're cool, and you're cool with that.
Yeah, bid on it.
Really?
Bid on it. Yeah, absolutely. And there are going to be people out there who say, hey, we don't want to sell our national parks. Don't. I mean, you got 150 trillion. I'm talking about selling 20 of it. There's no need to get crazy, but quite honestly, the federal government owns way too much, not only in land, they own buildings, underutilized billions that cost billions of dollars to upkeep.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got no business owning that stuff. Sell it. Take the proceeds, pay off the debt, give Americans a break.
I just think when you look at the grand scheme of things, the percentage of GDP, well, maybe not included in GDP, but the amount of money that we spend just on government, just on maintaining government, we could cut so much. If you look at the number of agencies we have, the number of people, I don't know how many people work for the federal government, but it's a gigantic. A very unproductive corporation that does not produce anything.
Right. Yeah,
that's what
it is. It's the most inefficient organization and produces nothing.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. But we pay in, and again, going back to something that we don't talk about is the not only entitlements but also government benefits that people get. You go to Congress for 4 years. You go to Congress for 4 years, you're going to get bennies for life.
Absolutely,
you're going to get bennies for life. And I think that to some degree, I really honestly think some people are running for office now because they want to maybe serve, but also it's a gravy train, baby. You do not have it in the private sector,
no.
Chris. And trust me, I've worked in radio where you get none of that anymore.
Right.
It does not exist anymore. When you're in government, it is an unrealistic expectation. You've got commitments to pensions. You've got commitments to benefits that are far beyond the private sector, quite simply.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's happening to those? They're collapsing underneath their own weight.
Yeah.
Overpromised. It's funny, isn't it, that the public sector pensions have overpromised.
Yeah.
Private sector pensions have not.
No.
Why is that?
I'm sure there are a lot of reasons for it. I live in a different generation than my father. Okay, my father worked for a company, and they had a union. Okay?
Yeah.
He passed away, but he had a pension when he got out of his workplace. That's unheard of nowadays. You just quite simply don't get this unless you're a part of a big union. Maybe you're the UAW. There are a variety of different unions that still do this. They've had to cut dramatically because it's unrealistic. With the government, though, they haven't had to change at all.
No.
My father worked for National Cooperative Refinery Association. And when he was there, he got out in World War II, and he started working there in the 50s, and he expected to get this pension when he got out of, when he left there. And he died, unfortunately, pretty quickly after 7 years after retirement because he'd smoked. So they had to stop. They stopped paying then, and my mother ended up getting I guess she could choose between his or her Social Security,
Yeah.
and she gets his Social Security because it's larger while she's still alive. She's been alive for quite a while. She's 88 years old, so she's been able to get 23 years of pension or at least Social Security out of that. But it would appear that, and maybe I'm wrong, it's just because I work in radio, and radio is awful because they really the most of the companies, and nothing against whoever, but most of the companies in radio, the big companies, are knocking on bankruptcy's door.
Right.
So they just don't offer that anymore. And I'm assuming that this is pretty much industry-wide, with the exception of, more the exception than the rule for those who still do offer pensions. But government has never stopped. My father-in-law is a judge. He's got pension for life. My mother-in-law is a teacher. She's got pension for life.
Yeah.
But most of the private sector, yon.
Yeah, and that's what the private sector has done. Number one, a pension places all the risk on the corporation providing the benefit. They've shifted to what they call defined contribution plans from pensions, which are defined benefit, meaning they're shifting responsibility for the retirement of their employees from themselves to the employee. Yeah. That's number one. That's one of the reasons why there's not as much of a pension problem in the private sector. There aren't as many pensions. Number two, these people know when they are funding a pension, who are they going to rely on if they can't meet their obligations? Who do they rely on? They don't have taxing authority.
No.
Federal government does.
Yes.
And to a certain extent, the state and locals do. So they're not as afraid, Rob, unfortunately, of making some pretty ridiculous promises because they know they can always increase taxes to take care of it. And right now you're starting to see the taxed revolting and saying, hey, wait a minute. Hawaii being one of them, public sector pension, those people saw that there was a 50% increase in the contribution necessary. And you got that in Kentucky as well, by the way. The taxpayer is saying, whoa, we don't mind being overtaxed. We have been for 100 years. But when it's because of someone who is still alive that I can point a finger at, their stupidity and their lack of preparedness, we ain't game with that.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that bothers me the most also is the caterwauling like we saw in Wisconsin 2 years ago, with people having to pony up a little bit more. The benefit that the government has is it doesn't go out of business.
Right.
They're always going to be able to screw you.
Mm-hmm.
They're always going to be able to screw you. And unfortunately, not so much in the private sector because you can't guarantee your business is going to be in business in 20 years.
That's right.
And when that happens, it's all over. So I guess what we're trying to say is I'm assuming that as far as just the pension system with regard to companies, is over pretty much. You can provide you can contribute to your 401k.
Right.
You can do it that way. But essentially, I think we've seen in the last 20 years that it's gone the way of the doo-doo.
40 maybe. What really happened, if you look at a chart, Rob, of interest rates, you see they all peaked in like 1980, 81, right? And then it started to come down. And as interest rates have come down, we've created for ourselves a very difficult environment to fund pensions. We used to get 8% on AAA rated bonds, right? Mm. You're not getting that today. In fact, you used to be able to get 10 and 12. Today, it's more like 1.5 to 2. But all these public pension funds out there are unrealistically expecting to get interest rates of 5. Wow. To get 5, you have to actually take a lot of risk. That's another thing, is that over the next 5 to 10 years, I wouldn't be surprised if some of them had some bad investments blow up on them. Yeah, because they went chasing return to make their pension obligations get met.
What do you recommend, Chris, for somebody who's just starting out in the workforce? Maybe they're, let's say 30 years old.
Okay.
And they've got 35 years to get to their retirement. What are you recommending that's going to help them out, that they could be safe, relatively safe when they retire?
Today, as we speak, and that's a great question, Rob. Today, I would normally say, look, the younger you are, the more risk you take, but you also have to have in mind the environment that we're in. Valuations on both stocks and bonds are like historically high right now. You cannot do that kind of thing. So what I might advise that 30-year-old today to do is, still take the risk of stocks and bonds in your 401k, Roth IRAs, non-Roth IRAs, whatever it takes, save stuff. But I would say, look, if you are on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of risk tolerance, an 8, I would behave as if it were a 6 or a 5.
Okay.
Just don't take as much risk as maybe you would be.
When I was 30, mid 90s, it was a terrific time to invest money in a variety of mutual funds. We had terrific, and we were experiencing this was before the tech bubble. This is when your annual growth rate was 20%.
Yeah,
which was insane, right?
Right,
absolutely insane. And we saw our portfolio go through the ceiling, and then it just stopped.
Yeah,
it just stopped. Right about 1996, when the tech bubble burst, when the .com bubble burst.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't last very long either. I mean, it was
it was there and gone.
Yeah. Let me ask you this also: what about individual stocks? At what point do you get to the point where you can do individual stocks? We have my in-laws. They've got money. They've done very well over the years, and they've had some individual stocks. My sons. My son and daughter both have Disney. They both have O'Reilly Automotive, which is stupid. I mean, have you seen O'Reilly Automotive? Mm-hmm. I think it's like $240 a share.
Yeah.
Crazy. What about individual stocks? What about penny stocks? What about what do you think?
Penny stocks I stay away from.
Okay.
Because there's just too much risk. And
you mean like Cumulus Radio? Right. I think that's about a penny stock right now.
Hello. If they trade on exchanges that most penny stocks do, chances are there's not a lot of transparency there. That's the reason that I'm not involved in those. But in terms of like your kids, they've got all the time in the world,
yes,
owning a few shares of whatever is invaluable. I myself had like 25 shares of Levi Strauss stock as a kid.
Wow.
And I think I got a dividend check in the mail every quarter of like $25. Now remember, that was the 80s.
Yeah.
$25 every quarter. Yeah. I mean, that's a couple of albums.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So I was geeked, but that it teaches kids an important lesson. And that's, so you don't need much money to be taught the lesson. As you get older though, and you're trying to manage risk too, then I would say that you need to have 20 to 25 good stocks, and that takes at least 25 to 50,000. I prefer more like 100. Otherwise, it's mutual funds for most people, I think.
So as we go forward, back to the situation with the federal government, the possibility of what they're going to do. What do you see happening if, for instance, they finally are able to pull their heads out of their rear ends and reduce the corporate income tax to 20%? What's going to happen in this country when that happens? Because I think it's going to be gigantic. I mean, already we've seen 3% growth in 3 quarters this year, just cutting regulations, just with the promise of that happening. What's going to happen when corporate tax rates drop like that?
I think that there is going to be excitement, but short term to me, because of that cut, is not nearly as important as long term. And here's why. When that top marginal rate for corporations is 20%, it not only is, look, you're not going to pay 20% because it's a marginal rate. Most of those corporations are going to see their effective tax rates drop from about 22% down to maybe 15%. That's huge.
Yeah.
First thing you're going to see is a lot more investment in things that help us grow. We call that capital. You're going to see more investment in capital. But long term, Rob, this is important. I think you're also going to see a lot of companies overseas relocate here.
Yeah, I think so too.
And that's, to me, that's the best way to make jobs grow is you attract existing corporations here in the United States. Let us do things here and get taxed less. You do hear from the left a lot, and this bothers me, Rob. You hear, the average corporate tax rate globally in the developed world is still 22, 23, 24%. Hey, we're not trying to do this to be in line with everyone else.
No,
we're actually we want to be competitive.
Well, nobody does that, Chris. I mean, what nobody in the business world says we are going to make a product that costs just as much as theirs and is equal quality
and sell for the same price.
Yeah, that's stupid.
You have to have some edge.
No. Yeah, of course. You want people to move here.
Right.
You've got a tremendous workforce. You've got the tremendous natural resources, and by the way, the people are the unnatural resources.
Yes. It is.
All of those things. I mean, if the playing field were even, I'd rather come here than Zimbabwe. But if Zimbabwe is 10% less as far as corporate income tax,
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, there is some. That's a great point. There is some tax rate where you consider Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Now I think about it, that sounds funny coming out of my mouth. But yes, there is some corporate tax rate where you consider Zimbabwe. The best thing about coming to the United States, though, if the corporate tax rate were 20%, but you named it, one of the biggest reasons is our workforce and our natural resources. But you know what else?
What?
Our protection of contract law.
Okay.
Which is why in the last recession, when we started getting around contract law, I got all nervous because we absolutely have to protect property, and property is protected by contracts.
Yeah, and that's very, very important because your ideas are worth so much,
Right?
And trust me, I have a good buddy who's trademarking a way to deliver medicines to your body that is revolutionary, and they're looking for $10 million. In development, and their ideas are sacred. They had another company that had a very similar product, but they had to be able to trademark their exact product. Otherwise, it could have easily been taken from them.
Yeah.
Could have easily been taken from them. That's very important. I notice you have a couple notes here about where you hope we will be with regard to the Fed, with the federal government in 70 or 80 years.
Yeah.
What is your hope that we'll see as far as government and taxing is concerned in the next couple of generations?
Well, as the millennials, Rob, I'm sure you've heard this, but several surveys have shown that they have a particular proclivity towards socialism.
Yes.
We're going to have to turn that tide.
Yeah.
And so much of what they think is bad about capitalism is bad, yes, but it's not capitalism. It's actually crony capitalism.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
if we can turn that tide, what I hope happens in 80 years, my wish for my children and my children's children will be that we're paying about 1/10 of the taxes that we currently do to support legitimate functions of government, which are, by the way, protection of your property and your life. And that's it.
Well, we are going to have to do something to turn the tide with regard to the next generation. And millennials, they are unfortunately a part of this this group that have been brainwashed in college. They are fine with restrictions on speech. They are fine with restrictions on freedom. And nobody taught them that socialism and communism killed 100 million people last century.
And their speech. Sometimes because of their speech.
Exactly. Well, my son is going to be 18 years old. My daughter is 12 years old, and they know. They know. I teach them. You got to.
And that's just it, isn't it? That lesson has to be taught at home because it's not being taught in the schools. In fact, I just posted something on Free Market Underground Facebook page about the whitewashing of communism in mainstream economics textbooks. Yeah. I mean, they are pained to say, these authors, they're absolutely pained to say anything negative. And you can tell, and it gets short shrift, and very small paragraphs related to why communism failed. They can't bring themselves to talk about it. They can't bring themselves to talk about the murder and the purges, right?
Well, this is an old argument. I remember in high school when I was a